Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're going to make a transition from where we've been with the Gita up to now. The journey has basically completed itself. In chapter 15, the seeker has reached, has established, touched firmly in truth, and recognizes that the battle before him will be to continually to cut with the sword of dispassion and discrimination that which still binds it. So this is, chapter 15 is the end of the maturation of consciousness. From this chapter on now, 16 and on, it is how to bring it into the world. If you look at the nature of the Gita, yes, we had to deal with the nature of our system that we resisted and opposed, our evolving consciousness in its movement to the self, to God, and to truth. Now, however, it's going outside of its own personal domain and beginning to work in the collective consciousness. It's beginning to work in the field of ignorance, in the field of possibilities. So these next three chapters, 16, 17, and 18, really describe something of the nature of manifestation, of the work that now is before one on the journey. Now, because of the nature of Gita, as I've said before, all the chapters are interrelated with each other. So in your journey, you can be encountering, if you're in the 4th chapter, you can be encountering this 16th chapter, you can be encountering the 7th chapter. They are not linear. They are rather describing a cumulative set of movements and strivings and processes that are, each one is a microism of the other, so that they are all interrelated. They're all included in each stage of the journey. So when you're going from yoga of action, you can't take action without knowledge, and you can't take action effectively without renunciation and without meditation. So it's all interrelated. And actually, when you look at the nature of the journey from this point on, it really now is about action. It's about having the right information of the way Prakriti is, the way the creation is, so that you can step into this arena with discrimination, with dispassion, with purpose. So that these can assist in the manifestation of Satchitananda, of truth, consciousness, and bliss. So, as we look into this next chapter, it has multiple levels to it. One level is a cautionary tale for one who comes out of their attained state, their exalted state, and re-enter into the creation, into Prakriti, and they start encountering these issues in themselves. They start meeting their own unfinished parts of themselves, unmet parts of themselves, unexperienced experiences. As I say in the retreat, we are a collection of unexperienced experiences, and these are what bind us. These are what hold us down from knowing our true, pure, infinite nature. So the process of revealing and exhausting these experiences goes on and on and on and on as long as you have a body. So to the extent that we have met our own darkness, determines our capacity to move in a world full of darkness. And when we do meet the world's darkness, if there is anything left in us that is matching, it will be activated, and we could be influenced or overtaken by it. So it's pointing to this sort of continuous process of revelation and recognition and realization. This continuous process of discovering what's left in your own system, but now you're carrying with you the force of Chitananda. Now you're entering into the world of the creation, and your purpose is not for yourself any longer. It's for the world. This is the Gita. The Gita is training the individual soul to become a manifesting instrument or channel of divine into the planet. This is its uniqueness. So chapter 15 is the completion of the process of your enlightenment. Completion of the process of coming to a relationship with truth and God and self. So now this is really, we're getting down to the purpose of being enlightened. To understand what it is that you're going to find yourself encountering and how to intervene in the forces of truth and untruth that you're going to encounter. If you remember, in chapter 4, Krishna said, whenever the light of natural law fades away and there is an ascendancy of darkness, during those periods I create myself. Maybe not a person, but in each of us, creates this capacity to manifest, to come into the world in some souls, and maybe many souls, and to some extent in all of us, actually. For the protection of the virtue, to destroy evil, and to reestablish Dharma, I come again and again. So, to protect the virtue, to strengthen the psychic being, to strengthen the awakened consciousness, to empower it to know its own nature, to be able to come out of its obscurity, it has to be seen and nurtured. And then to further come out, it has to begin to battle that which prevents and resists its ability to know its true nature. So it's strengthening the virtue and destroying the evil. And then the byproduct of those two will reestablish the natural flow of consciousness, the natural evolutionary movement of consciousness. So Gita is an intervention. It's an intervention into the condition of man. It's not a passive coming to a restful state of truth or God. It is a dynamic expression of truth or God into the world for the purpose of intervening, to strengthen the virtue and to destroy the evil. So it's because of that, it's different than other spiritual teachings. It's different, very different, because it talks of this preparation of the vehicle, of the consciousness, to be capable of intervening. So what is it that intervenes? It's the ego. The ego intervenes. And is this ego pure enough to intervene for the divine, or is it going to intervene for its own purposes? Or is it going to be veiled by its own unexperienced experiences, its own darkness, its own desires, its own hidden structures? So you have to understand the nature of what is trying to intervene is the vehicle. And the vehicle is made up of really effectively three conditions of ego. One is the pure I amness. The pure I amness is the most perfect vessel. It is that which can be present with all things arising, and through it comes the divine impulse, the divine evolutionary movement, what is required in every situation. This is the pure ego. Then there is egoing. This is the dynamic habit of ego in preserving its own separative identity in the world of content. That's what most of us are doing. We're unwittingly keeping the multiple plates of our multiple personalities spinning in order to preserve a sense of self and worth and whatever else we feel we need to have or protect. This is a human condition. And then the third stage of ego is egoism. Egoism is what we're going to be starting to talk about in this chapter. So egoism is a force that actually will bring greater obscurity. It will manifest greater obscurity. And so this chapter will begin to speak of the nature of egoism, that which actually is undivine, counter to the evolutionary purpose, that which is Krishna, the divine principle, has come to intervene in. So now we're going to get an orientation to this principle of egoism in light of these other versions of egos that are more collaborative, consciously or unconsciously. Okay, this is chapter 16, the Yoga of Divine and Undivine Attributes.
Chapter 16. The Blessed Lord said, absence of fear, purity of being, perseverance in the pursuit of yoga, charity, self-control, sacrifice, study of scriptures, austerity and uprightness, absence of violence, truthfulness, absence of anger, self-giving, peacefulness, absence of vilification, compassion, absence of covetousness, gentleness, modesty, and absence of fickleness, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, freedom from malice and pride. These are the attributes of divine wealth.
Sounds like God on earth, huh? Ain't me, right? We would say. So, but actually, this is kind of your litmus test of where you are and what you're capable of. You can count these attributes up. As a matter of fact, that's what we used to do. We used to make a list of all the attributes, and then every day we demonstrated which divine ones we manifested and which undivine ones we manifested. So we could keep track of our divine and undivine attributes. So it was a very useful process, actually, just to be in that self-evaluative self-inquiry. Because when divine manifests in the world, it's going to manifest primarily as sattva, maybe raja sattva, maybe tamas sattva, primarily as sattva. And one who's in sattva has no worries, has no issues, has no problems. So the first characteristic that's described in these attributes is absence of fear. Can you imagine living life free from fear? Where does life come in and grab you in that guttural way, that gonads that just grips you? You'll find it's always fear. For that to be gone, you would be free. Be free to play, to experiment, to explore, to discover. Free to be. So this is actually the first one listed, and it, for me, in my experience, my observation, it's one of the major evidence of a soul's integration. Because what they have is, they're not afraid for themselves. They have a mission. They have a purpose. They are involved in the people who are coming to them. They're not self-involved. It's only in the self-involved that we become worrisome to ourselves, actually, and others. But this is human. It's not undivine. It's human. Purity of being. That means you've met the pure innocence. You've met the divinity. And that spontaneous immediacy can be expressed in any moment. So there's immediacy and a naturalness and an innocence of that attribute. But at the same time, there is this perseverance, this determination in the pursuit of yoga. And of course, every one of these chapters is a yoga. So it's in the pursuit of the purpose of your birth. It's the pursuit of your dharma. A perseverance, and not forgetting your purposefulness, because that's evidence that the Satchitananda has found expression through you. And with that comes this aspiration, this devotion, or this drive for service. And this is the purpose. So when this has happened, then you're no longer purposefully doing anything. It's just naturally expressing itself. And therefore it's persevering. Because it isn't up to our nature, to our fickleness, to our changing moods, to our doubts, to our cavilling, to our competition, and to our moodiness and all the rest of the things that influence us. It carries us through all those. Charity, self-control, sacrifice, study of scriptures, austerity, and uprightness. So these are all qualities of one who has become the ruler of the kingdom with 10 gates. It's the ruler of the system, the ruler of the nature. The psychic being has stepped forward, or the awakened Buddhi has come, and it has come and applied its authority to the human system, and the human system is now obedient to either the heart or the intelligence. Of course, there's an absence of violence. Once fear is gone, there's no longer violence. Because when fear is gone, what happens when fear is gone? It's unconditional love. It's acceptance. It's willingness. It is the permission for life to show up as it is. So violence isn't there. Not in the way that it comes from an angry, unhappy, miserable ego. Truthfulness, immediacy, a spontaneous quality of being. Absence of anger, of course, that goes with along with the violence. Anger is always the result of fear or desire. So fear and desire have quieted, or they're gone at least in any one moment. By the way, these evaluations are always going to be in any one moment. You can't use history. You can't look back and say, well, I was violent, therefore I am violent. You have to be where you are in that one moment. This is a very important thing about evaluating yourself. You can't use the past to determine the now. Now, there might be another now when you are violent, who knows? But right now, that isn't what's coming up. But becoming aware of where you are in any one moment is not an evaluation based on what mind does, which is accumulates negative ideas of itself. It creates a momentum for what it is that we are. But what we really have to choose is what's here right now. And then take responsibility for what's here right now. If there's no anger here right now, there is no anger. There's memory of it being angry. And maybe in the future they could be angry, but right now there is no anger, there is no violence. So this is the way to see where you are when you're in this kind of inquiry. Peacefulness, of course, this comes naturally once you're beyond fear. Once fear goes, peacefulness comes. Of course, why would fear go? Fear will only go when we reconnect to ourselves, or when we reconnect, or when we connect to the divine in us, or in the truth in us. Then in that time that we're connected, fear can't exist. Because fear only can exist in disconnection. It can only exist in separation. We separate ourselves from the future, so we fear the future. We separated from past unwanted experiences, so we fear the past. And then we take these fears and project them into the present, if they're there or not. So the being in connection, this doesn't happen. Because it means you're here now. There isn't past or future. So fear disappears when we're in connection. And so does peace arise. Absence of vilification, which is, making other people wrong. Compassion, being able to be in the state. Compassion is one expression of unconditional love. Absence of covetousness, there's nothing that you want that others have. Once you have nothing, you realize that's your most prized possession. Nothing. Who would want what other people have? Gentleness, modesty, absence of fickleness. So these are all natural expressions of the nature. And of course, gentleness isn't always necessarily an expression, but it's there. It's there as a sensitivity to the impact one is making in the world. And compassion for the degree of receptivity for what it's bringing into the world. For how much people can tolerate, how much they can meet. I only take the gloves off in certain programs. Then I am not gentle. I do surgery. But I only do that with your permission. Absence of fickleness. Now this is this cavilling, fickleness. Oh, I want this. No, I think I want this. Maybe it's that. And, why don't you be this way? And no, that's not it. It's this what you do. And no, stop. It's not that so much. It's this. It's this endless complaining, endless dissatisfaction, endless wanting it different. And it's a fussy misery. It's anything but this is really where it's coming from. Fickleness. Vigor. Now, this is a curious thing. You don't become passive. You actually have vigor. It's a good example is like when a child gets a lot of attention, they start spinning. You ever watch children when parents pay attention or they're with their friends and friends are paying attention and they start spinning? Okay, there's a happiness comes because they're getting the attention they need from the environment around them. Now, when you get connected to that which is the source of attention, then there's the same kind of vigor. There's the same kind of delight. There's the same resourcefulness of energy available to you. You're being renewed continuously in your own relationship with the truth of you. So vigor is a natural expression of you moving into relationship with the reality of what you are. So I know in my life, the biggest concern was, will I have enough energy? Will I be able to keep up with it? Will I be able to do it all? That was my struggle, was always struggling to keep my energy up. Fearing, but it came from fear of not having enough energy. Fear of collapsing, being exhausted, being tired. So it's handy, because I do a lot of vigor. It's handy to know that no matter what happens, no matter I come out of samadhi and if my mind is working, it will say it'll be impossible. There's no way I can talk and do this class this morning. No way. But I just start moving. And once I start moving, this vigor starts coming. And when I finally sit in the chair, it's all there. It's all plugged in. Everything I need is here. So this actually talks something about the nature of faith. Faith that you will always be enough in any one situation for what is required in that situation. So in my own nature, it was self-doubt and trying to be a better person. So always struggling to be better or to be good enough. So this structure still is in my nature, and it's probably why I manifest in the world the way I do. So the ego is now in collaboration. The ego is manifesting through its own nature, because that's all it can do. It can only manifest through its own nature. There's no sort of different kind of person you become when you meet yourself or you meet the truth of your reality. You're going to be you, even more you than you've ever been. So much you that you would rather not be you at different stages in the journey. And then there'll come a time where you can really begin to appreciate the uniqueness of you. And then you become very useful in the world. Because it's as if you give permission for other people to be themselves too, by being yourself, no matter how that is. Forgiveness, of course, would be natural. Fortitude, purity, absence of hatred, freedom from malice and pride. These are the attributes of divine will. So these are indication of qualities that they will express themselves uniquely in each of you, that will give you a sense of how integrated you are on your own spiritual development. So what you want to do is list how many of these you have at any one time, and then list the next group we're going to read here in just a minute, and see how many of those you have. And then you'll understand your predicament each day.
Hypocrisy, arrogance, pride, anger, rudeness, and ignorance. These are the attributes of one who is born of demonic nature. It is said that the divine attributes lead one to liberation, and the undivine attributes lead to bondage. Arjuna, grieve not, for you are born with divine attributes. Two types of beings are found in this world, the divine and the undivine. The divine type has been described in detail before. Now hear from me about the demonic type.
Okay, so are you a good guy or a bad guy? I always had a problem with this. Because we're both. It's my direct experience. And in any one moment, we could be good or bad. Have you ever noticed that? So we can have our divine attributes sitting in quietude while our undivine attributes are manifesting, and then our undivine attributes will go into quietude, and our divine attributes will manifest. Okay. So kind of that's the predicament of every living being, every human being. Every person who has become self-aware and self-reflective, when a person has come to that state of consciousness, then this duality comes into existence. It doesn't exist in nature. It doesn't exist for animals or dogs or cats or birds. It doesn't exist for plants. It's uniquely human that we create this schism within ourselves. Qualities that we would call positive and qualities we would call negative. Okay, so first of all, this conversation is also true for the universe. There are divine and undivine attributes in the collective consciousness. And at any one moment and in any one situation with any one collection of people, the divine or the undivine will be manifesting, and sometimes they're battling with each other in the room. It does happen. This is how life is. This is a dynamic process. To imagine it's any different than that is to fool yourself. So the Gita is being simplistic in this way, but it has the advantage, simplicity has the advantage of clarity. Even though it's not completely truth, it's an approximate truth that gives clarity, because where we get in trouble is in the gray area, right? The 50 types of gray. It's in this gray area that we lose track and slip over the line or be somewhere in between and not know where we lie. That's quite human, by the way, because we don't really want to be too good or too bad. We would rather be gray, because too good doesn't last and too bad has consequences. So we learned in the course of time that we'd rather be in this ambiguous zone than one or the other. So their simplicity has some advantage if you have a sword and you're going to kill one person or another person, right? Now, when we really want to come down to truth, we have to be in a situation where the clarity and the requirement of the situation is such that divine and undivine is before you in a clear way. Then you have the right to action. Prior to that, we don't know, because it's not clear. We're not clear what is the highest good in any one situation. What will lift the situation, what will diminish the situation. So what we have to do is be established in the nature of what we are. When we're established in the nature of the truth of who we are, we have presence. When we have presence, then what's arising shows itself in its true nature without us adding content or story to it. Without the gray fades away and we begin to see the particulars. We can begin to see what is the truth here and what is the untruth here, and can I conduct surgery here, removing the untruth without damaging the truth. So we become skillful in being able to discriminate. The more and more we're engaged in this inquiry, in finding what is divine and undivine, the more and more we have correct information to be able to discriminate what it is that's true or untrue. First, of course, in ourselves. The more we do it in ourselves, then we can do it with others. And the more we do it with others and with ourselves, the more we grow in the clarity. So what I always say is when a person begins to manifest as a spiritual teacher, there's another whole level of growth occurs. Because you're not only dealing with your own issues, your own divine and undivine attributes, you're dealing with other people's issues, their divine and undivine attributes, And gunas interact with gunas. Qualities or characteristics interacts with matching qualities and characteristics. So you begin to meet yourself in other people. And in this process of meeting yourself in other people, you get more clarity in yourself what is yours and what is theirs. Then you become useful. Then you can begin to really become more of an ego, not so much egoing. Egoism, you wouldn't be a teacher. I mean, it can happen, but egoing is what creates the 50 Shades of Grey. Ego just knows what's there. It's just there. And divine chooses. Divine acts. We don't act. But when divine acts, we get all the information. It's as if we're acting through us as divine. We're both the individual and the divinity that's manifesting at the same time. So there's an ambiguity who it is that's acting, and of course that ambiguity's always been there because it's never been us acting ever. We've never been the doer. It's always been divine. And we didn't have a choice until we woke up enough to notice that we were distorting divine's action with our own action, with our own needs, our own wants. And that was what was in the way of the purity of what was coming through us, and therefore being able to discover the purity of what we are in action, dynamically. And the more we do this, the more we do what I read in the earlier verse. We strengthen the virtue and destroy the evil, and in that person reestablish the evolutionary purpose in them. So that they become awakened, they become inspired, they become striving, they have aspiration, they have devotion for something greater than what they currently are living. That's evidence that divine is manifesting itself through you as you. And this is the paradox, and you just get used to it when you start teaching. It comes naturally. But now these earlier verses, hypocrisy, arrogance, pride, anger, rudeness, and ignorance. All right? That's a real asshole, right? That's a real jerk. You know, someone who doesn't know themselves, but insisting they do, and is certainly capable of telling you what's wrong with you and what you need to do for them, without them having any question, any idea that their perspective is distorting what's arising. Right? We marry people like this, you know, or they become our children, or, you know, whatever. Wherever the lesson is, we will find these people. And there are opportunities to meet ourselves, correct? That's their utility for each of us, is to find ourselves in others, including the hypocrite, the asshole, the prideful, angry, rude, and ignorant person. Some of you, they're hidden, they're secret, they're in a locked-in closet, not allowed out. Then, of course, when you meet people like that, the door of the closet starts around. And we say, well, I don't like that person. Well, geez, who could tolerate that person? What's saying that is the rattling door, those unexperienced matching issues in yourself, that is being in repulsion and reaction to these qualities arising in others. It lets you know unconditional love hasn't come fully. You're still in the process. And you can have these, I assure you, we have some degree of all of these. It's inevitable. It's not just us as a person, because that really is not the conversation. There really isn't a person. But it's the ancestral karma, it's the atmosphere, it's the way we were brought up, the way we've been conditioned. So you're going to have some of this crap no matter what. It's kind of the muck that holds it all together. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't be capable of action. You've got to have something of the human being. Only human beings can manifest. Angels can't manifest. Perfect saints, well, they'll radiate love and truth. But even then, I bet you they have their bad days. We just don't read about it in the scriptures, right? They too kick dogs and throw plates and get upset and make demands and don't realize that they're their own enemy. They're their worst enemy. It's just we don't read about it in the literature. We call it blacklisting or editing out, right? Even if they had the information. It's all glorified stories. define actually a living one and to be able to watch them and to see the imperfections and how they coexist with the divinities. This is very useful in terms of how it is for you. It's very useful to see the limitations of that which is inspiring and uplifting you, so you can know that you can be that too. You can have both attributes. You have all these attributes in truth. You're the whole ball of wax. You're everything divine and everything undivine, everything exalted, everything debased. All of it's within you. And when you have met it all, then you truly are established in the space of unconditional love. Now, on the journey, it's clear, divine attributes help you. So as one is progressing, the positive attributes should be strengthened, the negative attributes played down. You have to restrain, you have to become aware of them, and then you have to restrain the negative attributes. You have to restrain taking actions based on them, restrain the story making that comes about them when they talk about you or other people. It says how unworthy you are, or you're not how good enough you are, how unworthy other people are, and how not good enough they are. You have to restrain the mechanism that would otherwise keep running. You have to withdraw your consent from them for a period of time for you to strengthen in the reality of what you are. Because until that virtue is strengthened sufficiently, that which is not virtue can overtake us. So on the spiritual path, we want to have as many divine attributes. It's called divine wealth, actually. It's like the coin to heaven. The more coins you have of divine wealth, the more likely you are going to be able to attain the journey. But it doesn't defeat, because you don't have a lot of coins, doesn't mean the whole journey can't be accomplished. And for some who's aware of how limited they are, they can be accomplished more quickly than one who's aware how good they are. That's the Saltwick ego. Oh, I know I've heard all this before. I know I'm divine. Yes, I have imperfections, but it's my magnificence that counts, my endless peacefulness, and so on and so forth. And then there's the part of you that covers up all the bad actions that occur in the day and all the judgments. Doesn't want to know they're going on, so that you can be right about your perspective, so you don't have to change just in case you found out you're not done. Yeah, it's an endless journey. All right, two types of beings are found in this world, the divine and the undivine. Okay, let's talk about this. There are actually forces that resist the manifestation of truth consciousness into the world. They are not just in each of us. They're also in the collective. You might say they're archetypal, that the collective error, the collective undivine qualities of mankind have accumulated in the collective consciousness, and some of these have become empowered forces. Some of these people lived a life that was so ego-based that they became an effective vehicle for undivine attributes into the world. You ever been around a nasty person? Mm-hmm. If you're around a nasty person, it tends to make you nasty. Just like when you're around an angry person, it tends to bring out the discomfort, at least, if not the anger. If you have a judgmental person, it tends to bring out your own judgment about how judgmental they are. So, if you notice that people are constantly communicating, broadcasting what they are to the world. So when one links up with this archetypal structure of what we call negativity or undivine attributes, then it becomes a channel for that. So there are people on this planet who are in a body who are usually unwittingly channels for this anti-divine force into the world. And some of us, especially those who are mature in the spiritual path, have at one time or another been that in one lifetime or another. It's the only way you can come to the absolute truth. You also have to know the absolute darkness. So you have to have met that destructive, negative force in yourself. Because even though it's not expressing itself this lifetime, or maybe it is at different times, for me I had rage. I had it this lifetime. And I could see its destructive force, but only after I woke up to the fact that I had rage. So, and it was a powerful battle because the channel had already been opened, because I had been raged at so much as a child that I took on the same capacity that my parents had to rage. So we inherit these things. It's transmitted just in the same way that divine truth is transmitted from a realized being, and a person then becomes more capable of divine truth. So can we transmit to others our undivine attributes. We can teach our children to be just as miserable as we are. We can teach our children to be just as addicted as we are without us even knowing it. Of course, everything changes once we wake up to the fact that we're doing it. But even so, for me, I woke up at the age of 22 when I discovered I was beating my dog viciously. And I didn't know I was doing it. I thought I was just teaching my dog to behave. It's when my neighbor came up and said, "You're killing your dog." And then it woke me up out of the absorption in that force, that energy that I had unwittingly become a channel for. And I was so appalled. Of course, at that time, everything was personal, right? I thought it was me. And I thought I had no idea. I had no access to it as a force coming from the collective consciousness through me. But it scared the shit out of me. It's like you discover you had an inner demon, an inner being that was running you, and you didn't even know it. And that's actually what it's like when you find an undivine attribute in yourself. It's something that you are unwittingly expressing, a channeling, without knowing you're doing it. A negativity that's streaming out of you to others, without you even knowing you're doing it. So this is one thing that happens on the spiritual path, is that if you haven't met these qualities of yourself, they begin to show themselves. And it might be quite appalling. It might be quite disturbing, because it feels like you're going insane, like you're not all that you thought you were. There are things that you didn't know you were. It may feel like you're being possessed by something other than yourself, but they're all and of course that's also accurate. Just as divine is living you right now, and you're not aware of it, so true are these divine qualities living through you without you being aware of it. So becoming aware of them, though, especially the heavy-duty, dark, juicy ones, that often takes a great deal of pain, or a great deal of consciousness, or maturity, or willingness to look at yourself, to be in self-inquiry. Because without sufficient thought, well, you can't see anything. The Rajas and Tamas just endlessly battle it out between them like fighting chickens in a pen, or dogs fighting each other. It's just a constant battle between the Tamas and the Rajas, always one trying to win over the other with its own justification and rationalization. It's only when Sattva comes forward that some resolution can ever occur in this endless battling that goes on within each of us as it does in the world. So there's no difference, actually. Even though now we're talking about manifestation, we're talking about the world about us, still we're going deeper into the nature of that which is not yet fully purified, not yet fully met, not yet fully resolved in ourselves. Okay, continue on.
Persons of demonic attributes do not know what is right action and what is prohibited action. They lack purity, good conduct, and truth. For them the world has no basis in truth or God. They say that this world is only a product of mutual union and is based on nothing but lust.
So it's egoism. This is egoism. Everything is about how it serves you, how it enhances your wealth, how it enhances your strength, how it enhances your knowledge, and how it enhances your prestige, and it will destroy others that threatens that. It will seek to diminish them, to fall in fault with them, to destroy them in their own minds or outwardly. It can be both. So that we can keep what it is, that unwittingly we are clinging to or grasping for, not knowing that it will never bring us satisfaction. That's what delusion is. You keep doing the same thing again and again, expecting a different outcome. This is the same as addiction. You keep doing it again and again, even when there is no pleasure anymore in that which you're addicted to. It becomes automatic behavior. And if you spend lifetimes doing this, then it becomes so ingrained that there's nothing in you that can find this out. That means there are truly some beings on this planet who are so deeply devolved or involved that they can't know this lifetime what they are. They can't discover. They can't go below. And they have to struggle endlessly in grasping and clinging to reinforce this core terror that motivates them, this core fear of all their unexperienced experience. That is the foundation of all ego and all egoism. That same foundation that exists in egoing is 10 times stronger and more vicious and more terrifying in egoism. So it's a matter of degree. And when you have something so guttural, so deeply embedded, there is no the only defense is offense. It's a battling continuously through denial or through attack from that unmet part of itself. Because it becomes the body. It becomes what it thinks. If it has the thought, it's reality. If it has the feeling, it's reality. It doesn't question itself. It can't question itself. As soon as it questions itself, the terror could be unleashed. So the Gita is beginning to show the extreme of ego. The world has no basis in truth or God. Now see, we do as a society in the Western developed worlds, we run the risk of a secular world. Because without some sense of God or truth, then all there is matter, all there is mind, all there is materialism, all there is are the whatever remnants of that religious influence in ethics or morality, or all there is the law. And many people, the law is the only morality, and basically it's how to get away with things. It's not about behaving any particular way, it's just not getting caught. This is the danger of secularism. There's nothing higher than yourself, and if there's only yourself, then you're only going to be your thought, you're only going to be your feeling, you're only going to be your desires and your moods and your preferences and your demands and your insistences. There will be no other reality, and there's no reference, no way to enter, no way to imagine another reality, except for perhaps if you fall in love with someone, and then they can become real too. And this is one of the ways that a complete egoism, someone who's complete egoism, can become identified with someone else and then suffer through them what they haven't met in themselves. They love their children, but they destroy their children. So this is the nature of a world where there isn't a larger purpose, when there isn't a larger context in which to live. And it's so taken for granted, no one questions it. This is what I notice when people come to the spiritual path. If they've had a spiritual or religious orientation of some sort, they have some concept of God, then they can make a deeper and more full progress towards that. But if they've not, all they can do is wake up. That's all they can do, they can wake up. Because there's nothing higher. And when you wake up, you can see your ego. And then it's all about resolving the ego from this awakened state. Now, sometime, eventually, for some of them, or for all of them at different times, they will be able to turn to the source of that which awakened. And there will be a sense of something greater. Then there's purpose. Then it's just not becoming this more effective, more integrated, more intelligent, more capable human being in the world. It becomes about becoming the reality of what you are. But with secularism, this is a limitation in terms of the ability to know there's something greater. Okay, so such mind is reminding me that we have to go on, so we'll move on.
Holding to this view, these degraded souls of little understanding and cruel actions are born to play havoc in this world and act for its destruction. Attached to their insatiable desires and full of self-eulogy, pride, conceit, and arrogance, they cling to false notions and work with impure resolves. Clinging to immense worries that can only end in death, they have sense enjoyment as their only aim of life. Bound by hundreds of ties of expectations and exclusively devoted to self-pleasure, desire, and anger, they always strive to collect, by foul means, hoards of wealth for sense gratification.
So you can see this in some characters that are in movies, right? Like The Godfather, and, stories of criminals that have been glorified. They have these huge egos, and they can be two types. This is the thing you should know. There's two expressions, tamas and rajas. There's demonic type, which is totally purpose is destruction. It doesn't care to create anything. It doesn't create to make anything. That's why using just demonic nature isn't quite the right word. There's another word for tamas. Tamas is demonic, but rajas is ashuric. Rajas is the energy for action and doing. So here in the West, we see more demonstrations of the rajas. A person who claims to the top of the corporate ladder, who's ruthless and self-serving, who rationalizes and justifies themselves, who then proves how magnificent they are by giving money to charities and proclaiming how great and having books written about them. We see this in politicians. We see it. It's a shirk in this country. But underneath all the rajas, there's also a demonic force, a destructive force. It will think nothing of destroying its enemies, of crushing its opposition. Anybody who says something even slightly offensive becomes the enemy, because they're in this network of worries and anxieties, and the ferocity of this goes right down to that primal survival structure of the ego in a body. So they can be violent and totally uncaring, ruthless, greedy, beyond sense. The leaders of this world in the West, most are these kinds of people. And they gain outward power, outward apparency of power. And they surround themselves with structures, and if they have enough money, that protect them and their power. And because they are the ones who gather the wealth, most of the wealth goes to them. It's almost as if money has become a tool, a means for the Ashuric forces to manifest in the world. So to reclaim these forces for divine, this is what the mother talks about, Shree Aurobindo talks about, because they tend to gravitate to these strong egos that are serving for the destruction of truth and God, actually. You can look at Trump. Donald Trump. Stupid, demanding, arrogant, hypocritical, doesn't see any of it, has got the truth, knows it, goes bombastically into any situation, commanding the situation because he's the God, he's the one, and people worship him because he's got the money, even when he doesn't have the money. He seems as if he's got the money. So that you can see these people, this exaggeration, these characterizations of these same qualities in ourselves. And if you have anything other than sadness and for them, then there's probably some match in yourself. Boy, this soul really hurts, or it's really going to hurt when they find out. And it will happen, but it can take a long time. A long time, and it probably isn't your job to take them on. Okay. Just one other thing. If you ever want to know what hell is, clinging to immense worries that can end only in death. Bound by hundreds of ties of expectations. It's when you are being run by things, this constant misery, worrying, desiring, having to have, can't let go. You gotta have what you have. You can't let go. You don't need hell to be in hell. You can be in hell and be in ignorance and not know you're in hell.
They always think, this has been gained today by me. This desire I shall attain. This wealth is mine. That too will be mine. That enemy has been killed by me, and I shall kill others too. I am the Lord. I am full of riches. I am successful, powerful, and happy. I am rich and of noble birth. Who else is above me? I shall do sacrifice. I shall give charity. I will rejoice. Obsessed with these evil traits, they are always deluded.
So this is the self-conversation of such a person. This is what they say to themselves. They glorify who they are and they're constantly utilizing who they are to other people, but as well as to themselves. They'll look in a mirror and they'll just see what a glorious being you are. So they don't seem to have a problem with self-esteem, right? They seem like they got it together. They seem like they got that confidence thing that we've been looking for. But it's actually based on a horrible, unexamined, unmet part of themselves. It's a colossal error, a colossal condition of consciousness to be stuck in. Okay.
Perplexed by many imaginations and enveloped in a net of delusion, they are attached to the gratification of desires and fall into hell. Self-esteemed, arrogant, and full of vanity, cruelty, and show of wealth, they perform sacrifice just for show, without following scriptural injunctions. Clinging to their egoism, strength, arrogance, desire, and anger, these malicious people hate me in their bodies and other bodies.
Without a moral order, when these beings will not contain themselves. It's just a matter of what they can get away with. If there isn't a rule of law, then the only way you will not be able to stop them. They will become tyrants. They'll become warlords. They're drawing from the most base animalistic conditions of man, where it will ruthlessly kill for its own self-interest, without question, without guilt, without shame, without anything. So this is what laws are trying to protect mankind from. This is how mankind has been able to civilize themselves, is by creating consequences for people like this, because they don't believe in God and truth. All they believe in there is their own will, their own desire, their own wants, their own needs, and that which they have claimed as theirs, be it people or things or attainments or wealth. So they're very good to see the exaggeration of the egoic attributes we all carry. Where does it lead to? Where does it end up? Unbridled greed, unbridled selfishness. It's truly criminality. It's true criminality. Sociopathic criminality. All there is me. It's egos, where ego puts itself in place of God. And that creates a tremendous transmission into the culture because they tap into forces that are the dark current, you might say. The dark, destructive current that goes along with the light current. And so they have an equal force, this battle of dark and light. And this with the Christian mythology of the God, the angels and the fallen angels and angels who are aligned with God. This battling is in the Hinduism as well. They have the same thing. This waging of these very primal, powerful, archetypal, collective forces in the collective consciousness, but finds its manifestation through different instruments and vehicles in the world. And the demonic is destructive, but the Ashuric is convincing and seductive. The Ashuric force is the guy who can sell you anything. It can have you, trick you out of anything. And it's doing it for its own self-worth. And something of its convincing power draws from the central reality, but it's self-serving. So people can become into very powerful positions, seemingly to be good people, and they can be influenced by these forces and become perversions, distortions, just like the Catholic Church became distortions at some time, the institution, where they were burning women at stakes and doing the Inquisitions. They fought the Crusades, totally anti-Christ teachings. It got overtaken by the individuals who used the credibility that came of the Catholic Church from truth to its own advantages. It became the power structure of the Middle East. It's how you gained information, knowledge. Once you had knowledge in the Middle East, that was greater than wealth. No one else had much knowledge. So your power was to know the Bible and to be a representative of the Bible. So it became where the Ashuric forces and the demonic forces could express themselves, just like now it's in money and politics that it can express itself. Even in that case, there is a God above, and they have rationalized what they're doing in their position of authority with God. And they have always put themselves on the side of the right. Ignorance always believes its ignorance is right. Ignorance always knows its ignorance is right. That ignorance for an ignorant person is truth. That's the nature of ignorance. And egoism is an expression of that tremendous distortion that can occur. So whenever one is looking for manifestation, one needs to wake up to these principles, to realize that these forces can come roaring at you because they will do the opposite of the Krishna. They'll destroy the virtue and strengthen the evil. It's absolutely possible. It's absolutely true. Now, how can you hold all that? What is the state of consciousness that will allow you to have space for evil, the darkest evil and the highest truth to coexist? What is that stretching of your capacity to include that is required for that to be? Because that's the only way you can be effective in the world. Because if you don't give darkness the space to be, then you can't move it. If you haven't met your own evil, if you can't give it space to be, not to act on it, but to know that it's there, that it exists, not to go condone it, not to give it permission, but to know that it's there, to experience it in yourself, withdrawing any consent for it to rule you, then you cannot move it in the world around you. If there's any great power in this 16th chapter, is to show you that how you gain the authority to become an avatar or a manifesting instrument of divine in the world is to meet both sides within yourself. You're the Darth Vader and the Luke Skywalker.
I repeatedly throw these cruel haters of humanity, the most degraded lots, into demonic wombs. Being deluded, they get demonic bodies birth after birth, and not attaining me, they go to lower and lower planes.
Okay, so there's a certain self-correcting thing that happens for people who are ruled by egoism. They die. That's the self-correction. They die. When they die, they have lost any authority, and they are like fulsome in a current, and they get cast into bodies of the most low order, consistent with the vibration that they have to resolve. And of course, then they take these bodies, and they're no longer the warlord, rather they serve the warlord, right? And then they get killed on a day of displeasure because the warlord didn't like them on that day. Took a bat, walked around the back of the room, smashed their head open. And they happen to have the same thing happen to them that they did to others. And then it's still diluted. And they then are lost in not only not being recognized for the power that they know that they are, but having defeated and lost themselves, they get thrown into a darker vehicle, a deeper unconscious. So that there is almost, till the consciousness almost returns to its original inconscient state. It's like a reset button. It takes the consciousness and puts it back into its absolute dark sought condition. And then it can evolve out as if from scratch. So this is the way it's structured. The universe has a purpose. Darkness is necessary for that purpose to develop. Separation is necessary for consciousness to know itself. It has to become something other than the truth of what it is. It does have to become some degree of dark to know its light. So it's a necessary part, but it does not have permission to interfere in the original intent, in the evolutionary purpose of the era, unless that era is collapsing. And then the darkness will be given permission to take over and reduce the collective consciousness so that that cycle can be completed. So it works both ways. This is the wisdom of Hinduism. They see the utility of all aspects of creation in the long, big picture of time. So it's useful to have that perspective instead of making this into a story about the boogeyman in the closet, because that doesn't serve anyone. It's something else to be afraid of, something else to imagine. It rather is a description of basic fundamental principles like a positive and negative that exist in all of creation, and that they're necessary for the evolution of consciousness, so for it to come to its highest place.
Arjuna, there are 3 gateways to hell: lust, greed, and anger. One should shun these 3. One who has freed himself from these 3 gates to hell and follows the right path attains the supreme goal. One who does not follow the scriptural injunctions and acts under the impulse of desire does not attain perfection, nor happiness, nor also the highest goal.
So this is a cautionary tale, and this is a clue as to what people are pursuing in terms of where they're headed. So the 3 that they give is lust, greed, and anger. Of course, lust isn't just sex. It's that craving. Greed is also a form of craving, but it's this where lust is more sense-based, body-based. Greed is outward, acquiring of wealth and possessions and fame and recognition. And then anger, which is the power. It's really power in this karma, where we use our negativity to control other people to get what we want. It carries something of the same authority. It's a dark version of the truth authority, where it insists in having it its way and carries that authority. So that's what anger is. It's the way it implements its own authority in any one situation. So these are the 3 gateways to hell, in yourself or in others, to give you a clue. One who has freed themselves from 3 these particular things. When you've come out of your addictions, when you come out of your raging, when you come out of your demands and insistences, then naturally the consciousness will start lifting towards its reality. It will start moving towards a more full expression of its original nature. One who does not follow the scriptural injunctions. This is the key. Without at least a cultural ethics or morality, without some sense of teachings that are greater than ourselves, that can act as guidelines, as signposts in the evolving soul, because every ego person who's expressing egoism was once an innocent child, was once open to the people around it to guide it, to show it the way. So even if the environment that it was born into didn't know how to guide it, there could be other places where the structure of what is true, what is right, what is real, like the Ten Commandments or the seven deadly sins, would at least be a cautionary tale for the evolving child to begin to get a sense of what was true and real in life. But if someone does not have sufficient love, they don't have sufficient care or nurturance, and there is no sufficient knowledge, some, because of the design of the personality, can take on these very negative attributes. And again, they didn't do it. Not consciously. Ignorance is not, you can't blame someone for being ignorant. They didn't know they were not, they didn't know they didn't know. So it's not like they're evil or bad and wrong, but they have to experience the consequences of their actions. Then consciousness wakes up, and when it wakes up, it begins to discern more and more truth, and it finds its way out, so that some children who are born in the same horrific ghetto or the same horrific family environment find their way out and come to the path of their own freedom from this otherwise hell.
Therefore, Arjuna, let Scripture be your guide to understand what is right and wrong. Thus, knowing correctly the scriptural injunctions, you should perform actions in this world. Thus ends the 16th chapter of Gita, entitled The Yoga of Divine and Undivine Attributes.
So at every level, having the right information available is the start point. Scriptural injunctions are the teachings, the correct information about the nature of how this world is, how it works, what's its purpose, who you are, where you're going, what do things look like, what are the consequences of choices that you make, what are the symptoms of what happens for you as you progress on the spiritual path. This information can be enough to assist a soul, if not in this life, but in another life, in their progress towards truth and God. So the next two chapters will expand on this principle of getting correct information. It'll explore the nature of the manifest creation, how to function into it, using often the three gunas as a comparison. We're beginning to understand the different expressions of what is true and what is untruth in the world. Okay. All right, so that's the finish of today's revelation on the yoga of divine and undivine attributes. All glory to Buddha. Love and blessings.